I'm Kenneth Moten. Thanks for streaming with us. The two most prominent Catholics on earth met today in the ancient city of Rome. Pope Francis and President Biden in a one-on-one meeting that lasted about an hour and a half, kicking off the president's second major foreign trip as he meets world leaders in several countries across the European Union. According to the White House, Pope Francis' meeting with President Biden on Friday was 3 times longer than his 2017 meeting with President Trump, and nearly twice as long as his 2014 meeting with President Obama. Leaders of the world's 20 leading economies will meet in Rome tomorrow for the first in-person summit since the pandemic began. The G20 summit will tackle a series of issues, including the global supply chain crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and climate change, a thorny subject for Biden, who will not have his major climate reform initiatives included in Congress's spending plan. This is all happening as the president prepares for another major summit, the UN Climate Change Conference, happening in Scotland. And the Department of Justice is discussing a plan to pay each child and parent separated under the Trump-era deportation policies hundreds of thousands of dollars. About 5,500 children split from their parents under that zero-tolerant policy would receive, if an agreement is struck, payments of around $450,000. But we do start with President Biden's second ever overseas trip as president, with a first stop in the ancient city of Rome, where the second Catholic ever elected to the White House has met with the leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis. That meeting, again, lasted about an hour and a half. Biden today describing the meeting as wonderful as the two men exchanged gifts and spoke on personal matters. ABC News Chief White House correspondent Cecilia Vega joins us from the Vatican there with more on this meeting. Cecilia, I have to ask you, what did these two men speak about?
Yeah, you know, Kenneth, this was a really important meeting for President Biden and Pope Francis. And I got to tell you, it's a little strange because it ended a while ago, but we're just starting to get the details about what they talked about. So climate change actually came up in a very big way during this meeting. President Biden just told us, reporters, that they discussed the need and moral responsibility to deal with this issue. And this is an issue where the two leaders have great agreement on climate change and seeing it from a moral perspective. We had been talking about that infrastructure bill hanging over the president's head leading up to this. You know, it still does have $555 billion dedicated to fighting climate change in it. That's the most the federal government will have ever spent, assuming it gets passed, on fighting climate change. But they did have to strip away a number of major ways of fighting climate change in order to appease moderates like Senator Joe Manchin. So that's not in there anymore. But nonetheless, the president was here talking about it today. They are on the same page when it comes to that particular issue. Again,
Cecilia, this meeting an hour and a half long. What more can you tell us about the relationship between these two men? Of course, we know with President Biden, it was said that this was going to be a deeply personal meeting for this Catholic president.
It was deeply personal. In the video that we received from inside that one-on-one, you know, you can see that they have a very close relationship, that they're actually friends. There was a lot of laughing. There was a lot of joking. They exchanged gifts that you mentioned earlier. This is the 4th time that they've met now, at the first time face-to-face since President Biden took office. And we heard the president just a few minutes ago tell us that the Pope blessed his rosary. That's something that he wears around his wrists all the time. You know, he is a deeply spiritual president, one of the most perhaps devout leaders that we've had, openly devout church-going leaders in decades as our country. He goes to Mass every weekend. He keeps a framed picture of him and President Biden on the desk behind him there in the Oval Office. You know, the Pope told Biden that he believes he's a good Catholic. So President Biden came out of this with a lot of smiles today, Kenneth.
Definitely. And when it comes to President Biden, he's still going to Mass. He's also still receiving communion. The president said abortion did not come up with this in his meeting with the Pope there, and that the Pope mentioned that he should keep receiving communion here. So was this an issue overshadowing the meeting?
Well, that statement from that President Biden just made right now about that statement from the Pope on abortion is really significant, and it's significant because of this. Because in just a few weeks' time, American bishops are going to have this big meeting back in the United States, where one of the items that they're going to be discussing is whether to basically publicly renounce and deny the ability for American politicians to take communion. politicians like President Biden who are Catholic and opposed and in support of abortion rights. Now, Pope Francis had been opposed to that idea of, as he said, mixing politics and religion, but he's really sending a strong message to those conservative Catholics back in the United States. One, by hosting this meeting here, the very first stop of this European visit by President Biden, and two, by telling him, you're a good Catholic. Just because you've got these views on abortion doesn't mean that you shouldn't be receiving communion when you go to Mass every week. As a Catholic, for this president, I'm sure that was a really big deal for him to hear, and something that he said is very personal and didn't want to go into details on, Kenneth.
All right, our Cecilia Vega there, our chief White House correspondent, breaking it down for us there in Vatican City. Thank you, Cecilia. Now to the latest in the coronavirus emergency. All eyes are on the FDA, which is expected to authorize the Pfizer vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11 as soon as today. Trevor Ault has the details. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Kenneth. This could be a pretty major announcement coming within even a few hours. The FDA expected to give that authorization to give the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine to even younger children. And unless something unexpected happens with the CDC next week, we could see 5-year-olds getting the shot as early as Wednesday. And we are expecting, at least at first, to see a little bit of a rush because the Kaiser Family Foundation took a survey. They found 27% of parents want to get their children vaccinated right away. But after that, the demand could maybe fall off a little bit. 33% of parents say they want to wait to see how this first batch of kids tolerates the vaccine before they make a decision. And of course, some other parents are not interested at all. And they are not the only ones. Yesterday, we saw hundreds of firefighters and other union members outside Gracie Mansion, the mayor's official residence here in New York City, and they are protesting the vaccine mandate. These firefighters have until 5 o'clock today to either get vaccinated or go on unpaid leave. And if they choose that second route, that could make an immediate impact because right now about a third of the FDNY is unvaccinated. Kenneth?
All right, Trevor Ault, thank you. Coming up, imagine calling 911 and no one answers. That's a sad reality in some cities, which are missing up to half of their usual 911 dispatchers. We'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. We're learning new details about that gruesome case of alleged child abandonment and murder out of Houston. The lead investigator and the sheriff both describe it as one of the more difficult cases they've ever worked. An 8-year-old boy allegedly murdered in his home, all while his 3 brothers were left alone, abandoned for months with their brother's dead body in sight. Their mother and her boyfriend allegedly leaving them to fend for themselves. Neighbors tell ABC News there were red flags at the apartment complex. Some say they helped the children with food and charging their phones. The children's mother is under arrest along with her boyfriend. He now faces murder charges. There are, of course, questions about how all this could happen and go on for months. Zachary Keish is in Houston.
A gruesome discovery. Gloria Williams and her boyfriend, Brian Coulter, are facing several criminal charges after the body of her 8-year-old son was found in an abandoned apartment.
In my long time of working homicides, this one's up there. You know, this one affected us.
Sunday afternoon, a 15-year-old boy belonging to Williams called police for help, saying his brother has been dead for a year. 31-year-old Coulter is charged with first-degree murder, and 35-year-old Williams is accused of tampering with evidence and injury to a child by omission. Authorities say the 8-year-old, Kendrick Lee, died of multiple blunt force injuries, and his decomposing body was found in plain view.
We saw soiled carpet, no furniture at all. No bedding, no blankets, nothing that we could see.
3 of Williams' other children, ages 7, 9, and 15, were allegedly left alone for months with their dead brother. They were found malnourished and showed signs of physical abuse. Melody Robinson spoke to our affiliate KTRK.
For you as a mother to watch somebody do that to your child, that's not a mother. A mother doesn't do that.
A neighbor says several residents complained about the odor and other issues in apartment 531.
I understand the management company called your apartment. And what did they ask you?
Yeah, they called me and they want to know, have you seen those guys, your next door neighbor? I said, no. I said, can you go and knock on that door? I did, but nobody answered, so that's happened a few times.
Our thanks to Zachary Keach there. Such tough details. And the CDC connects negative childhood experiences such as abuse or neglect with a myriad of long-term health impacts, including but not limited to alcoholism and alcohol abuse, smoking and drinking at an early age, and unfortunately suicide attempts. Joining us now to talk about this and just really dive a little bit more into what to look out for, Katie Albright, Executive Director of Safe and Sound, a child advocacy organization based in San Francisco. Katie, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Kenneth, thank you so much for inviting me today.
So, Katie, a separate report mentions that individuals who reported 6 or more adverse childhood experiences had an average life expectancy 2 decades shorter than those who reported none. What other critical issues can people who suffered abuse as children face?
Well, the risk of abuse and experiencing abuse impacts not just the child, and you've mentioned several indicators, whether or not it's long-term health indicators, mental and physical health indicators, also experiencing critical care in school, as well as loss of productivity. The impact to a child also is significant, and the impact to a family and the community at large is significant. These cases of child abuse are horrific, and our hearts collectively go out to the families that have to experience such tragedy. It really doesn't have to be this way. There's so much prevention and that we can think about, and early warning signs for families to prevent child abuse and child fatalities from happening in the first place.
So horrific, and it just really puts all the senses at work there. Makes you angry, it makes you sad, and you just mentioned there about what to look out for. We were watching that horrible story there in Houston. What red flags can people be on the lookout for to identify a victim of child abuse?
Well, oftentimes child abuse and fatalities are happening because significant stressors are impacting families. They're weighing upon families. Families don't wake up in the morning wanting to hurt their kids, but the stressors of life come crashing down upon them. And some of the most clear indicators are poverty, mental health, and depression. And so if we think about how do we support families from the start, how do we help families alleviate these stressors in their lives, often through prevention programs that can really think about how do we help families from the very start. I'm happy to go into that in more detail.
Yes, please do, because when you talk about helping families, there's so many resources out there at the state level and in the local level with municipalities. So what resources are available to victims of child abuse?
Well, there's incredible need for economic supports. You think about having your gas cut off or your housing not available or food insecurity. All of these indicators around poverty really contribute significantly to the stresses that are happening in families. And so we as a community need to think about how do we raise up economic supports? How do we think about earned income tax credits, increasing the minimum wage, increasing affordable housing? Research shows that a $1 increase in a minimum wage leads to a 10% decrease in the numbers of child abuse. Conversely, communities that are restricting economic supports to families, restricting housing and earned income tax credit, and other kinds of economic supports are equally seeing an increase in child abuse. So when we think about what we can do to support families, we need to think about how to support these economic and concrete supports. There's incredible communities, there's incredible resources in communities where families can reach out to, whether or not it's home visiting programs or family resource centers. Family resource centers are places where families can come voluntarily to get support, whether or not it's counseling or childcare or economic supports, help finding job, help finding housing, whatever it takes. Family resource centers are called different things in different communities, family support centers, family centers of excellence, parenting centers, but they all work on one core component, which is how to build protective factors in families so that all families can thrive and all children can grow up in families and be their very best selves.
And Katie, I know with children in this pandemic, I'm sure things have been compounded by the pandemic with the fact that you've got kids who are, yes, a lot of them are in person right now, but there were a lot of kids, and maybe still kids, a lot of them who are still at home. So I'm curious about how this pandemic has impacted that and had an impact on child abuse.
Well, certainly there's been an increase of stress on families during this time, increase of isolation as families are sheltering from home, parents, caregivers concerned that their children are away from school, and so the loss of learning that's happened over this period of time. Economic loss, particularly around job loss and economic concerns that families are struggling with. And that puts an increased pressure and stress on families. And so that's why it's so incumbent upon all of us to think about how can we support families during this time. The data will come out shortly about whether or not we've actually seen an increase in the number of children that have been abused, but certainly we know that there has been an increase in stressors on families, an increase on domestic violence, and an increase on pressures that families are experiencing.
All right, the resources are out there, the red flags. We gave information, and we hope that people look out for those as well to help so many children out there. Katie, thank you again for joining us and putting this all in perspective.
Thank you so much for shining a light on this important issue.
Thank you. All right. And there is a shocking and critical shortage of 911 operators all across the nation, with roughly 240 million 911 calls coming in every year. Some cities are missing up to half their usual dispatchers, which means some emergency calls are going unanswered. COVID is playing a role, but so is burnout and low salaries as agencies work to make up for the shortages that could impact response times in an emergency.
911, where is the emergency?
It's the call you expect will always pick up.
Total of 8 people that were dialing 911 and not one answer. Didn't even answer to say, please hold.
But for Ashley Bagwell from South Carolina, she says earlier this month, as her 6-year-old daughter Hadley was having a seizure, she couldn't get through to 911.
I was absolutely terrified. I remember just screaming, what do I do? You know, what do I do? I need them to talk me through what to do. It was the scariest moment of my entire life.
Bagwell says her oldest daughter ran to the neighbors who also dialed 911 but got no one.
We have actually been experiencing much higher staffing shortages throughout the pandemic, and it's actually really starting to kind of take a head.
The International Academies of Emergency Dispatch reporting some centers struggling with as much as 30 to 50% vacancies. In Alabama, 88 dispatcher jobs open across 10 agencies. Georgia's 911 coordinator telling GMA the state is suffering a critical staffing shortage, made worse after the death of 14 dispatchers from COVID-19. GMA visiting this 911 call center in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Just to advise you, that patient has a history of heart attack. My medic units are responding. They're going to be there as soon as possible.
Where they say they are struggling to hire dispatchers.
We're about 30% short of overall staffing.
I'm sure that these men and women are doing everything they can to help the people who call here. But are there delays?
There are. We've seen a drop in our ability to answer 911 calls within 10 seconds and within 30 seconds, which is some of our standard. We're not able to be as fast as we were because I don't have enough available people to answer those phones.
The dispatchers trying to keep up with calls say it's frustrating.
As a supervisor, when you are in charge and you see those calls holding, it is stressful.
What concerns do you have when it comes to these shortages?
Be patient. Don't hang up, because the line rings in a queue. Once you hang up and then call back again, now you're at the bottom.
Where Bagwell lives, Lexington County 911 officials say they're facing the same challenges when it comes to staffing shortages. And the calls were not answered due to a large volume of 911 calls received within a 15-minute period, which overloaded call takers. But county officials say dispatchers called back the initial caller within 3 minutes, but there was no answer. And several other calls were made, finally connecting with a caller 10 minutes after the first call.
I just hope no one ever has to experience the terror of this, and I just don't want anyone to have to go through the stress of 911 not answering when your child is unresponsive.
And we can report that Bagwell's daughter is doing much better. By adding to this issue of shortages, it can still take up to a year to get a new 911 dispatcher fully trained. Some states are working on or have passed legislation reclassifying 911 dispatchers as first responders so they can get better benefits. There's a similar bill currently in Congress. But remember, if you can't get through to 911 immediately, don't hang up. Coming up, some good news on your Friday before Halloween. We bring you the Chicago principal whose dance moves wowed her students. We'll break it down with Principal Anderson. Look at her already dancing on this Friday. We'll show you her moves after the break. Welcome back. It's time for Feel Good Friday, where we bring you a little good news heading into the weekend. And today is all about a Chicago principal whose smooth dance moves stunned her students. Take a look.
That's what's up. Let me say, hey, say, hey, let's go. Hey.
All right, now, whoa, look at that. That was interim principal at Walter Payton College Preparatory High School, Farida Shabazz Anderson, showing off her moves on homecoming night. It's the first quarter that students are back in person at Walter Payton College Prep. And she said they wanted to celebrate by bringing everyone together. And we've got a special treat for you on this Feel Good Friday. This is Principal Shabazz Anderson joining us live. Hey, good to see you.
Hi, Kenneth. How are you? Hello, everyone.
Hey, thank you again for joining us. So take us back to that moment. Did you always know you were going to do what you did, bust out those moves that night?
I did know, but when the spirit moves you, you know, you have to get out there and you have to show the students that you still have it. So, you know, it's always exciting to party with our young people and have an opportunity to enjoy the space with them. So
it's always good when they want you to party with them as well.
Right.
So let's show off that video. We can see it a little in the video, but what was the reaction really from those students when you broke out those moves?
I think they were very surprised. They didn't know that I could do that. And I don't think students dance much like real dance anymore. So I think that they were excited to see that, you know, I still had some cool moves in me.
Look, you're like, I wasn't always the principal. I got another life here. So what was your students' reaction when you saw that the video went viral?
I was so surprised. So I actually have 2 sons who are in high school, and they came to me and they said, Mom, you know, you're on TikTok. Mom, you're on Twitter. And I was like, oh, my goodness. And then the students came up to me and they said, you know, Principal Shabazz, you've gone viral. And I couldn't believe that this had happened. And it had moved so quickly. I mean, it was like less than 24 hours. It had just caught on and everyone was just really excited about it.
No, it's just really impressive. And we know that it's been a tough time for schools when it comes to this pandemic, families, educators. I'm a big fan of educators like yourself. And when it comes to COVID-19, you guys have been going through it. So what did it mean to have everyone together in person for homecoming?
Well, it was really exciting. We had to follow a lot of protocols. We weren't sure if we were even going to be able to have our homecoming dance. We had to make sure that our students were vaccinated or had a negative test. We had a really big setup. We had students spread out throughout the building so that they can enjoy themselves. We had an outdoor setup, and all of our entire school community came together so that our students could have this moment with one another so that school could feel normal again. Our student government came out, our parents, our school community, our Friends of organizations, and everybody just worked together to make sure that we could have this moment with our young people and with our school community again.
Such a great moment. And, you know, before you go, I have to ask, you know, people think that the principals are all serious, no play, very strict. Even though with my principals in South Carolina, I was able to disarm them. They love some Kenneth Moten when I was in 11th grade. But they think you're not fun. What do you say to that when people say y'all are just too buttoned up?
I would say that you should really get to know your principal. We are people outside of the schools, outside of these spaces, and we love our students. We want the best for our students, and we want to see everyone learn and grow. And, you know, we like to have fun too. So everyone get to know your principal and hug them, share the love, because we have really been through a lot along with our students and our faculty in these last several months.
You sure have. And talk about schooling the kids. You gave them some lessons on that dance floor, so congratulations on that.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Thank you so much for joining us, Principal Farida Shabazz Anderson. Great to see you, and have a great rest of the school year. See ya.
Thank you so much.
And to find out more about these feel-good stories, go to goodmorningamerica.com. That was fun. All right, that does it for this hour. I'm Kenneth Moten. Thanks for joining us. Remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern. Stay safe and have a great day.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.